Hi everyone, welcome to this bevy of terfs. Great to see everyone here together. We're starting to coordinate more and more now, network and everything. I was supposed to say join forces, join voices. And so I've got Jill Ovens. She's been on with me before, and Jill's the National Secretary and co-leader of the Women's Rights Party. Di is the co-founder of Mana Wāhine Kōrero, and she's also been on with me before separately. And Q101404 is Deb Hayes. And she is the instigator. Oh, yeah, instigator is a good word because it sounds like a troublemaker. Instigator of the petition against the Midwifery Council's revised scope of practice. And Deb's a midwife of 32 years, and Robin Jones is also she's a retired midwife, and she's also been involved in this petition against the revised scope of practice. But anyway, we thought let's kick off because yesterday, the 19th of September, was Suffrage Day in New Zealand. And before we talk about that, because we did a few things, I will just say that sometimes people don't always know what suffrage means. And because it's a bit of a deceptive word in a way, it sounds a bit like suffering. But in actual fact, it just means the right to vote in public or political elections. So that's what yesterday was Suffrage Day in New Zealand, and New Zealand was the first self-governing country in the world to give women the vote. However, Montana in the United States, you could say, was the first place in the world to give women the vote, but they're a state and not a country. Right, so let's start with Auckland. Jill. Oh no, you went to Wellington, didn't you?
Well, I did go to Wellington, but I could report on Auckland. But I just want to say that we never say that we were given the vote or granted the vote. We actually won it. Women won it. They actually collected 33,000 signatures across the country at a time when we didn't have social media or anything else. 25%, a quarter of the population of New Zealand women at the time signed that petition. So it wasn't just that one petition either, because there was a whole series of petitions over decades before that. So they were organising and they lobbied and they eventually won the vote. So I'm really clear that that's what we should be talking about.
Yeah, you're right, Jill, because they worked for it.
Yeah, it didn't just get given. And in fact, the vote was very close. And so they nearly didn't win it. But anyway, in Auckland, there was National Council of Women ran their annual event that they always have in what we used to call Suffrage Square, but it's now got a te reo name. And before that, it had another name, and somebody at one stage was going to take on all the beautiful tiles that were made, I think, in the 1970s. But anyway, there was a campaign fought by Councillor Kathy Casey to save those tiles, and so it's a beautiful location. And but it wasn't a very nice day. About 7 of our members turned up, all dressed in white, and the National Council of Women people had organised to have a security officer there. And when
for you guys,
they got it. Yeah, they got into trouble because they had a placard and they were told it was an apolitical event. And so Gail Baldock pointed out to them that Suffrage Day is not political. That's what it's all about. But anyway, so then it turned out that the reason they had a security guard there is because we did the same thing last year, turned up to the event all dressed in white with placards, and they weren't very pleased and they thought they better get some security in. So
how
I didn't
threatening.
know with that because the instruction to the Aucklanders was to be really nice and engage with the National Council of Women people and talk to them about the issues. But as it turned out, It's not quite what happened. But anyway, so that was Auckland, and we're planning another event in Auckland tomorrow because lots of people can't work. And so it was pointed out yesterday, maybe we should be campaigning for it to be a public day or at least celebrated on a weekend so that people can come, because that wouldn't help people who work 24/7.
Yeah. So why didn't it work out so well? When you say you wanted to engage with the National Council of Women?
Because it became a bit confrontational and yeah, so that wasn't the intention. The intention was for us to join in. They had the Māori Women's Welfare League there. They had other groups there. So there's no reason why the Women's Rights Party shouldn't be part of that event. But anyway, our intention is to hold our own event. And next year we're planning to get some funding from one of the local boards to have an event, and one of our members is going to write a play. So we're going to be organised a bit better next year, and we're going to do our own thing. There's stuff there if they don't want us there. But anyway, Di will talk about Wellington, but I'll just talk about just briefly about it. The Wellington women organised it really well. They've been planning it for weeks. And people came and there was lots of food on the table. We just set up in the middle of Midland Park on Lambton Quay, didn't ask permission, just turned up. Nobody questioned us. The weather was beautiful, a little bit windy, but sunny and really nice. And we handed out flyers to people and had placards and things. So I'll let Di talk about that, but I just want to briefly talk about the next thing that some of us went to, which was the National Library had an event whereby a young woman who is absolutely wonderful gave a beautiful presentation. And then we went into this, don't know if any of you have been in the room where they keep the Treaty of Waitangi. And they also keep the petition itself, the suffrage petition there. And it's a dark room and it's all Rima and it's like a womb. It's circular and it's not even either. It's just beautiful. And she talked us through. We got to see not all the signatures because there's thousands of them, but you get to see some of them. And she also pointed out where there was wahine Māori who did sign it, and but nobody, there was a lot of Chinese women in New Zealand at the time, and they wouldn't, because of the mining, like in Central Otago, Arrowtown and such, but they weren't entitled to vote through this petition, through the legislation. So there was a, white policy like there was in Australia. So anyway, but 2 Chinese women did sign it. So she went through all that sort of thing. It was really marvellous. I didn't have very high expectations, but gosh, it was good. And afterwards we went over to Parliament and we did what's becoming our annual flying of the suffrage flag, because Parliament flies the pride flag all year round times. They never bother to get out any suffrage flag. So we take a suffrage flag and we stand on the steps of Parliament and we have our photo taken. Last year, I think there was 4 of us. This year, there was about 10 of us. So every year we hope to grow this event exponentially. It's maybe even get some of the women parliamentarians to come down. So that was, and then afterwards we went off to the backbencher and had some beers and snacks and
oh, that sounds all right.
It was a wonderful day. Yeah.
Yeah, so Di, I did watch some of your live stream in Wellington when you were doing it. Jill says, it was a beautiful day and everything like that. I think she's full of it, isn't she? I mean,
the sun was shining, but the wind, like I said in the live stream, it knocked over the tripod, blew hats off, placards went flying. These, in our posters, because we had Meri Te Tai Mangakahia and Kate Shepherd on a poster together.
Yeah.
And that was taped to the pole and that got blown off. So Tāwhiri Mātia was pretty busy. It was a really well organised event and heaps of women. I believe there would have been about 20 of us all told.
Oh, okay.
At least 20. And we were walking up and down Lambton Quay well, me being me, I was hollering out stuff now and then, and just the working crowd, the old, you look around and you don't know if anyone's got a pulse. It was really well organised, really well attended. We had people engaging, the public were engaging with us. But one thing to note is when we spoke about women's rights, people, just walk straight past us. But if we spoke about suffrage, then they'd take the pamphlet. But if we said it was about women's rights, they just, no thanks, no thanks. But okay, suffrage day, because we were dressed up. Philippa, my big sister, my older sister, made our costumes.
Beautiful.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. Thank you, Jill. Yeah, so we, just come in all dressed up. I mean, people were looking at us, and it just struck me as just so typical of the wording. If we say suffrage, they'll take a pamphlet, but if we say women's rights, they just walk past.
Yeah.
A few people did engage. I'm sorry, Jill, I forgot the PA. Because I was going to bring the PA in, but I will next year. And we had to leave early because we were on school pickups. So next year we'll have the PA. But it was, I was just so grateful that it was organised. And there was lovely, yummy baking. And we took a flask of coffee. And it was a really good event.
Yeah. And look, what I found interesting too was that you were reading out at one stage the difference between what Māori women needed and what like their European counterparts needed, and I found that really interesting that the Māori woman had totally different concerns than
yes. Well, they had totally different lives at the time, totally different experience. Most of it was around land because they were landowners or the caretakers of the land. Like even to this day, a lot of land has passed through the maternal line. So, the Māori women, first and foremost, were about the land, alcoholism, domestic violence.
Yeah.
And stuff, solo parenting, even back then, and the impacts of land loss on all these things, whereas the suffragettes were more concerned about the temperance, which is anti-alcohol, and moral behaviour.
Yeah. And I thought, and what it was also interesting too was to hear you say that Kate Shepherd was instrumental in preventing women of the moko kauai, which is the chin tattoo for people who don't know, from being in the suffragist movement.
It was frowned upon and not allowed, Not allowed's a bit strong, like we're talking about a time when we put it into its social backdrop, not liking it or just, having a bit of disdain for it is actually enough of a sanction to not do it.
And
it wasn't just Kate Shepherd, but she was quite pivotal. And no, you can't be a suffragette if you're wearing because the Christian women that were here, they saw these as heathen signs, symbols. They're not signs of Christianity and what have you. But it wasn't her alone. But Kate Shepherd was quite pivotal in the removal of moko kauai, of the Māori wāhine, if they wanted to join the movement. And from what I've been reading, there's at least 4,000 Māori women did sign this petition, which is quite a vast number.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even
and mostly from the South Island, more from the South Island than the North Island.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's interesting because Meri Te Taimangakahi is Te Rarawa, which is top of the north, by the Hokianga.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we just are all flawed, aren't we? We're never perfect. So, to hear Kate about, she say it wasn't just her, but the suffragists sort of frowning upon this, you just think, some of them did do that. We are flawed. We don't always act, perfectly and all that. So let's just own it sometimes,
Yes.
we are. Yeah.
And that's all it is, Katrina. Just own it, and that's that.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no more than this.
Yeah.
Than the acknowledgement and owning it. That's enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to take yourself off into the corner and whip yourself. Hey, this is what critical race theory, is that Māori are always victims, and Pākehā, well, use the evil, go and whip yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten a little bit like that, hasn't it? So, yeah.
Oh, it sure has.
Yeah. So we in Christchurch we did a few. We didn't do anything exceptional like or special as well as what Auckland and Wellington do, because it was a bit of a last minute thing. And I blame you, Di, for that, because I wasn't going to do anything. I was whinging and whining and saying, "Oh, I can't be bothered organising anything," and then you women chivied me along. So I think the next day I said, "Oh, yeah, okay." And as it so happens, sort of Kate Shepherd's gravesite is in Christchurch. And so we just organised the last minute, get together. I'll be there, bring a coffee or whatever. And it turned out to be quite nice. It ended up being sort of 6 women and a baby. And it was, it's a very casual, very low key, but we did it. And
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. We had real camellias from Christine's tree, and we had these beautiful hand crocheted ones were given out to us as well.
Yeah, you're just saying that. You're just saying that to shame me, aren't you?
Yeah, they were made by Natalie McCroskey. So
yes, that's it, Natalie. Yeah. That was awesome. And because prior 3 weeks ago, I emailed the camellia growers to ask them about white camellias and about buying a dozen or 20, but I never heard back from them. And right up, even like with Katrina, well, do you know where any white camellia trees are? Where are they? I was just asking everyone. And then the night before, when I was speaking with Christine, I went, "Oh, you don't happen to have a white camellia tree, do you?" She goes, "Oh, I do, actually." Yeah. Like, "Oh, lovely. Pop some in a basket and bring them along, please." So it was really lovely to have, like crocheted ones, but the basket of real ones as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So the other thing that happened is that people went to their local libraries and ahead of Suffrage Day and asked them if they were going to do a suffrage display. And none of them that I know of were planning to do so. But the funniest one was at Point Chevalier Library, where there were some young librarians, and one of our members, Linda, she asked them if they were going to do a suffrage display. They said, "Suffrage, what's that?" So she explained to them what suffrage was, and one of the young librarians said, "How cute." So anyway, Linda was quite put off by that. So she wrote a letter to one of our councillors, to Helen White, who's one of our MPs, all sorts of people. She had about at least half a dozen people in her letter, and she's written to them to complain about the libraries not doing a display. And Christine Fletcher, who's one of the councillors, got back to her, and now there's a bit of a campaign to get a display in every library anyway, so at least in Auckland. But also the idea came from Alison Lewis in Dunedin, who used to be a librarian, and she's going to do a letter writing thing as well. So she also ran the library in Dunedin, and they had nothing.
Well, seeing as there's a blimmin' pride thing just about every month or whatever, I mean, we can do one day a week or extend it out to one day a year or extend it out to a week, of actual display or something. Doesn't seem like a big ask somehow. Yeah.
But it's not inclusive, Katrina.
Well, well, the thing, of course, is that the men who say that they're women, even back then, they already had the vote. So they didn't need to be included. So yeah. So anyway, also last Thursday, wasn't it, that you presented your petition, your oral submission, I should say, to the Petitions Committee in Parliament against the Midwifery Council's revised scope of practice. And I watched that on live stream, and that was sort of certainly something, but it's still not available on replay video, is it?
No.
No.
Thinking myself, Katrina, because I was thinking a few days before, I should ask Katrina to live record it.
Yeah.
And then because there's just been lots happening in my world, it just left my head. But we wrote to them today to ask them where it is, because they've actually put one up that's got nothing to do with anything from, I think it's the 12th of September. So it goes from the 31st to the 12th or whatever.
So ours was the 12th, and they've put one up for the 19th.
The 19th, yes.
Yeah.
It's about nonsense.
It also crossed my mind, Di, to actually sort of video it, record it, and then I thought, oh no, it'll be up on the website, soon afterwards. But I don't know, you always wonder why they're sort of withholding like this, whether it's just sort of, something there's no conspiracy behind it or what. But because it is so contentious, you kind of wonder if there is something about it that they are withholding it.
I immediately think that, especially knowing that the one woman, especially knowing now that the one woman who was a ring-in is a handmaiden.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. So on the petitions, Deb, she instigated this petition, got nearly 7,500 signatures on it. We presented it to James Meagher, the MP for Rangatira. That's right, isn't it? And he, and it went to Parliament, and then it goes to the petitions committee, and they invite people to make oral submissions to them, and that was where you made yours, Deb, and Di did, and Sarah, who's not here, and it was just you three, wasn't it?
Yes, it was just Deb's, the council, and MWK, because the sneaky rats put everyone else as, your submission's similar. This is a similar submission.
That's right,
because,
yes.
There were only like MWK and Deb's.
Yeah, because I did put down that I wanted to do an oral submission as well, but I never got invited to do so. So talk about that, because I've heard that you arrived there and the three women from the Midwifery Council were already there waiting, and and they were looking a little bit sort of pleased with themselves or something to start with.
Yes, the false bravado, the loud laughs, the chitter chatter. Rex and I sat opposite them, and I said to Debs and John, I'm going to go sit up by the traitors. And Debs, I noticed Debs made eye contact, and they had to break it.
Yeah,
because they know they're wrong, but because I live an hour and a half out of Wellington, so I've got to thread the needle and beat all the traffic home. So I didn't get to watch the Midwifery Council's response, but Debs, I really loved your submission. It was clinical as, it was great, and it was just real and raw.
Thank you. You too. Yours was awesome.
It was just...
It was moving.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So
Deb, maybe Deb could talk a bit about why she felt it necessary to make a submission for anybody who's watching this who might not actually understand what the whole thing was about.
Do you mean to start the petition, Robin?
Well, why did you feel a need to have a petition against a scope of practice document? I mean, I know because I was in on all the council, the email council. What do you think?
Yeah.
And I mean, you needed to do that petition because it was such a dog's breakfast that it looked like it had been written by a space alien who'd never visited Earth before and didn't actually know how alien sex works.
Yeah. So yes, me too. I had been through all that as a midwife, the two consultation farces, and so the second one that had 90.8% of stakeholders saying that they disagreed with that scope. the scope that didn't have woman, wahine, baby, peppy, mother, breastfeeding in.
I mean, a scope of practice is supposed to tell us what it is we are meant to be doing, what we're expected to do, and maybe a bit about what we're not expected to do. But so how can you have a scope of practice about midwifery that has nothing in it about women or mothers, or even and I don't even think it had the word baby in it. It had peppy, but
no, no, it only had infant in it originally. An infant is 0 to 12, and midwives look after 0 to 6 weeks, and then they're out of our care and they're out of our expertise. So I decided to do the petition because, well, mainly I had lost hope because in November, they had written to the midwives to say that they had all agreed that this was going ahead in spite of the 90.8%. But then I just happened to read Sarah Henderson's Substack about the petition, about the new proposed scope of practice, and it was good. And it also gave me some hope, because I didn't know, and the Midwifery Council, of course, would not tell us that that had to be gazetted, and that and Sarah sort of said, well, gazetting is contestable, or once a document is gazetted, it is contestable. So that's when I thought, well, let's make a bit of fuss, with the help of Sarah, absolutely 100% behind me, and Di also. So that's, and I think 1,000 signatures a week, basically, from all sorts of people.
Yeah. I mean, it was most petitions just, well, I don't know, they're lucky to get 100 signatures a lot of the time. So this was quite, for New Zealand, this was quite spectacular to get that number of signatures.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I think one of the things about it that I just found astonishing in hindsight was that it took, something like 4 years for them to come up with this bit of idiocy that isn't fit for purpose, and the money that it costs.
Well, what we do know,
taxpayer money going into crap.
I mean, we do know that 377,000 was the initial one, but once it got beyond the second year, they must have got hold of more money from
you can be sure of one thing: the people who worked on it did not work for nothing as volunteers.
Well, I remember when I made my own submission to the petitions committee. I think that's how it went, isn't it? And I said that, as a person who's not a medical person or a midwife, I could read the scope of practice that's in place right now and understand what it meant. But the revised scope of practice that they were proposing, you could not understand it at first reading.
I couldn't understand it, and I was working as a midwife.
Yeah. So I was as I said, I watched it on live stream, and Deb and then Sarah, came in, and then Di, and it was really good. Their submissions were so sort of on the nail, clear and to the point, and then the and the sort of 3 women from the Midwifery Council came in and sat down at the table that you and Di vacated, and they sat down and started just, I'm sort of thinking, oh gosh, I wonder what they're going to say and all that sort of thing, and they were a shambles. It was actually quite terrible that this professional body came in, sat down, and was a shambles, and I was.
I guess it was fitting with the document they came up with.
Yeah, and some of the things that I picked up in their chat, and which I haven't been able to go back and sort of obviously listen to it again, but I picked up that I mean, they weren't. I don't think they were really expecting to have to make their case to the petitions committee.
Yes, they thought they were just going to have a chat now that those pesky girls have gone. So we'll have a chat and put things right.
Yeah, so that's right. Yeah, we'll come in and we'll just come in and just, as you say, just put everything right, and you can forget about what they said, and I made a couple of notes that when they were talking about why they were made the revised scope of practice, why they worded it in the way they did, was that they wanted to use whānau, and we'll talk about that word whānau in a minute, which like translates loosely to family, but I'll just say something about it now. But of course, it's a much broader concept in Maori than it is in English. The concept of family, and if you're saying whānau, so it doesn't necessarily just mean your immediate family. But anyway, they saying that they wanted to, this is just unbelievable. They used it to take, because they wanted to take they didn't want to make the pregnant woman, that's right, sorry, I'm bumbling away here. They wanted to make it whānau-centric instead of just about the pregnant woman. And this was, this is just bizarre, because this is what midwifery should be all about, is a pregnant woman, and she decides who she wants to support her.
I mean, some pregnant women actually need protection from their family.
Exactly.
And you need to be excluding that family as much as possible for that woman and her baby to have a safe start to their relationship, and during the pregnancy and after that baby is born.
And I think we managed to get that across in our verbal submission as well.
Yes. And in our previous submissions that we've done to them, as well as, not every woman has a safe family. And then you look at, what about women in prison?
Yes.
And they're like, we've only just stopped handcuffing women during childbirth in prison because Mr. Calvin Davis reckons they might abscond. Well, Mr. Davis,
between contractions, they might run out the door.
Yeah, how to tell me you weren't out your children's birth without telling me you weren't out your children's birth?
Well, I mean, I actually became a midwife as part of the pilot program of the direct entry midwifery scheme in New Zealand. I was in the second ever intake of students for that. And it was Karen Gilliland and Sally Pearman who basically ran the whole show back then. They were very, very, very strong on women-centered care.
Yeah.
And I don't think I ever heard anything about caring for the family except, as it pertained to the woman in the entire 3 years of study.
Yeah. No, that's right. And so our Women's Rights Party submission really focused on the role of the midwife in empowering women, because it's women who actually labour and give birth and subsequently breastfeed their babies. So,
well, one of the worst points of concern in the scope was the reference to gaining feedback
and decision making
from whānau.
Yeah.
But not so bypassing the woman. So now the woman has, according to the scope, it doesn't really matter whether the woman thinks that her care was good. It's what the whānau thinks.
Well, that is so open to abuse. You go to an appointment, with your partner, and the obstetrician wants to induce you for whatever reason, and the woman asks the questions, and she decides that no, she doesn't want to be induced. And so her partner tells the obstetrician, yep, we'll be there, as if it's got anything to do with him.
Well, he usually only turns up at the last minute anyway.
Yes.
There's one of my concerns with the scope of practice, because midwifery, the core business, has always been mums and bubs.
Yeah.
And when the scope goes through, it is removing midwives off their core business onto this whānau, onto everyone else.
Amorphous non-thing.
Yes, and because they haven't described whānau as what it actually is, and all the te reo that they're using has some metaphorical, conceptual meaning that we can't quite pin down. And all their descriptions, they're feeding you back sound bites and poetry because it's all shit.
Yeah.
And one thing that's bad about it is that the scope of practice, the next stage is to develop the competencies, what's required of a midwife, and they're derived from that scope of practice. And that's a problem. And when we were doing the pay equity as the Midwives Union, that scope of practice and the competencies are incredibly important in establishing the role of the midwife in terms of the various factors that you use to work out how much midwives are underpaid and undervalued in comparison to other occupational groups. So these documents are really important, and not just the scope of practice, not just for the midwife to know the boundaries of your practice, but for the rest of us as consumers to know the boundaries of the practice.
Well, I sent it to a friend of mine who lives overseas, and she couldn't actually understand a single word of it. And she, her English competency is really good. She's professionally trained, works as a midwife overseas. We depend a lot on imported midwives in this country. And so you're going to give them the scope and say, this is what you do here?
Yeah. Jill, I did note that the competencies, they have gone to midwives and with a very short timing for feedback. And that the College of Midwives, I feel, have sent quite a strong submission in, particularly regarding that word whānau, to pretend that we're talking about woman here. So I don't know if that's better, the response for the scope, but I was pretty impressed by that.
I'll just jump in here and just let people know that the College of Midwives is different to the Midwifery Council. They're different bodies, so that it can be a little bit confusing sometimes.
Oh, there's such mutts. The Scope of Practice Council, they're mutts, because they allude and they go, yes, we consulted with Dr. Shane Retty. But what they don't say is that he responded saying that they're not allowed to do that and he can't comment. We're self-governing, we fund ourselves. But all of the Scope of Practice, they've applied for public money.
Well, they don't fund themselves either, because midwives pay enormous, exorbitant fees.
Midwives pay $790 a year for that privilege.
Yeah.
Those clowns.
They are clowns. And
It should be noted that over the 4 years that they were beavering away on the scope of practice, that actually a lot of people who were involved in the project along the way left. So the people who turned up the other day probably only been involved for a very short time.
Well, actually, this is quite right, because was it Greg O'Connor who was leading the petitions committee, and when the Midwifery Council, those 3 women came in, and he said to them, it was quite amusing, he said to them, so have you learned anything from this process? Meaning that, they've obviously, had their rear ends kicked a bit, and the CEO started off by saying, well, I wasn't here at the beginning. So she started to say that. Yeah.
Why is she defending it so greatly then?
Yes. So anyway, she what else they said was that the word whānau, the way they use it, because it provides a layered and textured meaning
Special. That's so special.
Yeah, how special. Back to the metaphorical, the nice poetry.
Yeah.
Whānau means people of blood and
Right.
intermarriage. That is it. That is your whānau. Anything else is whanaungatanga.
Right. Yes.
So
yeah.
whānau is your siblings, your mum and dad, and your blood lineage, your whakapapa is
Right.
your whānau.
So your cousins and your cousins and whatever. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All it's all blood related and marriage.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people for midwives to look after, isn't it?
Isn't it? Isn't it?
Well,
You've got to look after
especially if the scope of practice mentions sexual, what is it? Sexual reproductive services
Health,
or something.
Yes.
And that's very unclear as to whether that means you're supposed to be looking after the sexual health of the of your uncle.
Yeah, exactly. And also about this, we've talked about this revised scope of practice, and it's been 4 years in the making, and it's an A4 piece of paper.
Yes.
that is what it's taken 4 years to compose. An A4 piece of paper.
And it was so confusing that they had to have an extra paragraph at the bottom to explain why the word whānau was in there, and it still doesn't explain it. And they managed to not mention the word woman in that supplementary paragraph. Why special enough, but not woman.
Yeah, and we're doing this for around about between 6 at a guest estimate, get between 6 and 12 women a year who say they're men. That's correct, isn't it? We've taken those figures of Australian numbers because we don't actually have the data here in New Zealand to count it. So we've taken that.
I've been told there's probably a maximum of 6 women a year in New Zealand giving birth who don't consider themselves to be women.
Because they did get this George Parker, who's at Victoria University, got a massive grant, and they've been looking into doing research around trans men and giving birth and all that. And they were supposed to come up with a sample size of, what was it, 10 or 12 or something.
Good luck.
They couldn't find them. They I think they struggled to even get to 5.
I think they extended it as well. I don't know what it was supposed to be, but they ended up, it was over a 5-year period. They managed to get 29 people, but those people weren't women who say that they're men. They were men. They were women. They were lesbians. They were non-binary, and all the other names that they like these days.
They seem to be very glib about this, isn't it? Women who say they're men give birth. And I mean, Robin, you've talked a bit about the ravages that taking testosterone does.
Testosterone
to a woman's body.
Everybody who's talking here tonight makes testosterone because it's actually essential for women's health as well. But we make this little tiny bit compared to men. So we need a little bit, but too much just does so much harm. It not only harms your body, it actually changes your brain, and it doesn't change your brain in a nice way either.
What are the consequences? Is it aggression or?
It's increased aggression. Also, women have more cognitive empathy than men do. And that's not an opinion, that's been studied and proven. Well, testosterone actually makes women lose their cognitive empathy. So they don't relate to people the same way that they did before. It also, if you're a young woman and you take testosterone after being on puberty blockers, you will never have children because you'll be sterilized. You will probably never have comfortable sex because your vaginal wall will be so damaged and thinned out and frail that penetrative sex will be painful. and you will never have an orgasm. So parents that are affirming their girls to be boys are guaranteeing that their children will never have the choices that they had about, finding a partner, having a nice adult sex life, having pleasurable sex, having their own children. So the ones who think that they're men and they're still having babies, they skipped the puberty blockers, which is why they were able to still get pregnant. Some of the pregnancies are accidental because testosterone is thought of as a contraceptive, except it isn't. So if you have sex with a male-bodied person and you're not using contraception and all you're using is testosterone, you can end up pregnant. But those women often end up with cesarean sections because their vaginal wall is too fragile to allow for a normal birth. And of course, if they've already had top surgery, they're not going to be breastfeeding. So both their health and their child's health is negatively impacted forever. And there was recently a paper published by some sociologists who posited that because women go off testosterone when they become pregnant, because it is actually it causes cancers in fetuses, especially female fetuses, and because it causes genital changes. These people posit that because some of these men, they have such terrible gender dysphoria from being pregnant and being off testosterone, that maybe they should just be able to have some testosterone because the gendered midwifery system is too focused on fetal well-being.
Read that, yes, Robin, yes.
Of course we are.
I can't believe that somebody actually said that out loud.
They did, because they also said that it would actually, more or less, that it would be a better world if there were more queer people in it. Of course, babies that are subjected to whatever their mothers do haven't given consent to have their lives derailed.
Well, so the Midwifery Council is just almost is paying no attention to this at all, are they? They're almost encouraging it. Like
No.
They're very, as I said, being very glib about it. It's like, oh well, these will change everything for these women.
Of course, I actually can never, no one's actually been able to adequately explain to me in a way that makes me understand why, if you are really a man, if you are really in the wrong body, why you would want to have a baby in the first place. Because surely there is no better proof of your feminine body than the ability to gestate and birth a baby.
What they love to do is have their photo taken side on, fully pregnant with a beard.
And mastectomy scars, don't forget them.
Oh, yes, that's right.
And to treat their dysphoria while they're pregnant, they want to go to a gynecologist's office and not see the word woman anywhere. Isn't that?
Those six not maximum women a year in this country, we're actually meant to change, every other bit of language around pregnancy, birth, and breastfeeding.
Yeah.
I mean, to use whānau in that thing is as bad as talking about the breastfeeding family. There's no such thing as a breastfeeding family. I mean, my personal joke is, we wanted to be a breastfeeding family, but Granddad wouldn't take his place on the roster, so we had to give up.
Yeah, so I was just about to bring that up, Robin, that it isn't just for these 6 women that the scope is happening. It's also to allow men with fetishes to come in and become part of the breastfeeding family. So
absolutely.
we're doing it for women and for men to be able to be given a chemical concoction of medications and to create, I call it moob pus, because that's all I'm ever going to call it. And have babies latch onto them. Well, babies have rights as well.
They do, and babies have a right to be breastfed by their mothers.
Yes.
And I have never met a woman in over 40 years of supporting women to breastfeed. I have never met one woman where the purpose of her breastfeeding was to prove that she was really a woman. But every account I've read, every scientific study, anecdotal report of men breastfeeding, it's not the baby's welfare that they're after. They do it as a gender affirmation thing, and the baby is just a prop.
Yes.
Which is why they never keep at it for very long, because it's actually a hell of a lot of work. And once they've breastfed a baby for a few times, or even maybe a few weeks or whatever, they give up because, well, they've accomplished their mission. They've proved to themselves and the people around them how womanly they really are, and they don't need to do it anymore. But of course, by that time, the breastfeeding relationship with the baby's mother is toast.
Yes, that's right.
And so the baby just gets put onto formula, which of course also means that the woman's health is not optimized either, because breastfeeding improves the health of women.
Yes, because it's a really important concept, is the mother-baby dyad. Just as one. The baby doesn't even know that it's separate from its mother.
I mean, the mother-baby dyad is the foundation of every human society. The relationship that a mother and baby forge is what happens in that society to other relationships as well.
Well, not just humans, but most mammals, I would suggest.
Well, yeah, all mammals, but
all mammals.
I don't think the midwifery scope of practice, fortunately, doesn't extend to other species.
So this thing, that's foundational thing where everything starts is like, oh no, we're just going to change it all around now. it's not important. We'd rather
notice.
Because when Robin and I were LHA League leaders 50 years ago, I think that's when I started. The whole thing was, kangaroo mothering. That's what we used to talk about.
Yeah.
So right from the birth, we would advocate that the baby was put, skin to skin on the mother, not the father, the mother. Nowadays, I think fathers get in there in that act, but and then to breastfeed on demand
well, that's because breastfeeding is so much more than an infant feeding method. It's actually a relationship that you and your baby are in together that grows as the baby grows.
That's right. Well, what I found when I had my first son, who's going to be 50 next year, is I kept saying to people, nobody told me I was going to fall in love with him.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that.
And that's because the hormones around breastfeeding are there to make you fall in love with him, so that you don't just throw him out the window on a really hard day and go and do something more fun.
Yeah.
And that, because let's face it, babies are not, they're hard work. They're not fun every minute. They're boring, they're tiring, but you'd lay down in front of a car to save them, because your hormones that are stimulated continuously by breastfeeding mean that's what turns you into, a mama bear is the hormones, and that's why continuing to breastfeed is so important, because it keeps your baby alive long enough till it can forage a bit for itself.
That's really interesting. I mean, as a person who, the only one here who chose not to have children, I find, like this is actually all very sort of a lot of it's quite new and interesting to me to hear about breastfeeding and stuff.
Bonding.
I mean, what I do know is that I've never met a woman who's had a baby who said, "Oh, that was easy," or even a few months down the track, "Oh yeah, yeah, piece of cake."
Well, what they say is it's the hardest pain to bear, but the easiest to forget.
Yeah.
Because once you have that baby in your arms, I mean, yes, you might have stitches and all the rest of it, but
it's nature's way of ensuring that you have more than one baby.
Have another one. Yeah.
And the thing about that love that you get from the hormones, and it's meant to be by nature, is that a lot of women, including myself, when you have your second one, you think, how am I going to love that baby as much as I love the first one? But you see, it's not a pie.
It's not a finite resource.
No, it's amazing.
So they just getting back to the revised scope of practice and the submissions process to the petitions committee, the Midwifery Council also said that words to the effect that, you'll understand what we mean by when we use the word whānau, when you read all the other supporting documents around it, around the scope of practice. And it's like, can they hear themselves?
If you read all this brainwashing stuff that we've written, then you'll know what we know. And you too will be able to speak in double Dutch.
Yeah. And I think, Deb, you've said it yourself, midwives, they barely read the emails they get now.
I tell you, I've spoken to so many midwives that haven't read it.
Yes.
They don't know what's in it. They're too busy.
Yeah. And so not only to get this, garbled, scope of practice, well, as it's a revised scope of practice at the moment, a garbled one. But then next thing it's like, well, if you read all these other documents around it, you'll start understanding it.
And that's what scopes were designed for, isn't it? I think you're supposed to get exactly what the parameters of care for a profession is.
I mean, a good scope of practice should be really clear on what you're expected to do, and where are the limits that you can go up to in your practice.
Well, that's what the current one is, isn't it? And as I said, even when I read it, I understood it.
Although I got it. The current one is quite brief as well, and you really have to go to the competencies to understand. We looked at a lot of other scopes of practice of different professions we were comparing midwifery to, and I have to say that it wasn't as good at explaining what a midwife does, even the current one.
Well, that's maybe why I understood it, because it was so brief and yeah.
But the thing about those documents that accompany it, it's all about the journey, isn't it?
Yes, navigation.
That's right.
Navigation.
Oh, come on, Di, tell us about was it the Kahu Pokai? Is it the Kahu
Pokai? Gifted from a man who's married to someone in the bloody council, and then he found himself as a consumer. Like, this gifted is really annoying. We can take it that he was paid.
Yes.
Now, when I was brought up, this gifting of Māori names used to actually mean something. Yeah. There was a history to it. There was a lot of hui and meetings around it. There was a reason for it, say for like tribal affiliations, whānau affiliations. So a gifted name would come with its own whakapapa, with a whole history and reasons, and you'd see this name was gifted and you'd be able to read why and why for. For example, now, Kapiti College has changed all its buildings to names to reflect the kaupapa of Parihaka, which is Ati Awa. Now, Ati Awa are the three feathered people that wear white feathers, and Kapiti is associated. They have a whānau association. That's appropriate. They've got history, they've got whakapapa history and everything, but to just give this, some man comes along and goes, reads the Williams Dictionary and goes, yeah, that'll do, yeah, kahu pōkai. Because I can tell you, every Māori woman and man that I've asked for a definition of kahu pōkai has just stared blankly at me.
They haven't said, oh, that means midwife.
Correct. They've gone,
you must have had the remit to make sure that there was no femininity in there, you would think.
Yeah. No, it's just one, the Queen just laugh at me and go, what does that mean, girl? I go, well, apparently it means midwife. And they just rage bark, laugh and go, no, it doesn't. I go, no, that's right, Queen.
Maybe they need to read the supporting documents, Di.
I think so. And when you look at the words associated with both kahu and pōkai, they're really dark. Yeah. The definitions are dark, and about birds and albumin, and then something about, even the name they gave themselves about the lying in for highborn woman. Bro, half of us just squatted and went back to work, get a grip. Let's be real here, or in a hastily erected hut occasionally. But, it wasn't this highborn stuff. I think, they're telling on themselves.
Yeah, and I did hear Sarah, she talked to RCR radio the other day, and she was talking about, she was saying that she thinks that the Midwifery Council consider themselves highborn women.
And absolutely, because, gosh, I don't know. There can't be that many highborn women pushing them out now. You can buy them.
Oh, goodness. Well, that brings us on to something else, doesn't it?
Yes. Or that too posh to push and, all these things.
Well, when you were talking about the textured layer of meaning, the image that popped into my head was a delivery bed after a delivery that has layers of blood, amniotic fluid, pee, and poop on it. That was my textured layers of meaning, understanding.
You can't say that sort of thing to a woman who hasn't had babies.
That's exactly what it is.
You get covered in everything. It's not a big deal, Katrina.
Yeah, there's a thing goes round that the original midwives in Māori society before colonisation were men, and I just think that's probably bullshit.
Yeah, it's undoubtedly bullshit. It's not true in any other culture that I'm aware.
No, and
rewriting stuff, Jill.
I know they rewrite history, and that thing about whānau being blood relations, in the cultures that I've been in, because I was in America when I had two of my babies, we had our women friends around us. There was nobody related to me anywhere thousands of miles away, but it was other women, my friends, who helped me out, who looked after my other children, who were there, and I was there for them as well, who bought food after the birth and washed nappies for them. That's what we did for each other. It's always been a womanly thing. In fact,
woman's business.
My later league book was called The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding. Bet that's gone now.
Yeah, it's woman's business, which is what I said to that panel. Like, you can look at all the old movies, all the old stories. What are men doing? They're out on the porch smoking, boiling the kettle.
Yeah. Well, in Western literature, they're in the waiting room passing out cigars.
Yes.
And we went through a big history in New Zealand of handing it over to the medical profession, and that's when the men were all being involved in the birthing, and they did used to literally turn up at the last minute, and And it was only recently, in the last 30 years, that midwives have you know,
I've had older women tell me that they got yelled at by midwives for pushing too soon because the doctor wasn't there.
Probably on the golf course. But yes, that's right. And it was because consumers, women in the 1980s, fought to have midwives present at the birth and able to sign off the baby's certificate and not have to have a doctor there, that we have the current system. And Robin mentioned Karen Gilliland before and Sally Pearman. They were very instrumental in that. So it wasn't until 1990 that the law was changed to have midwives have autonomy in terms of the birthing process. So it's despicable what's happening.
And now we can't even call ourselves midwives.
No.
And anything feminine is almost like blasphemy.
If anything, that's woman-centric, isn't it? It's woman-centric, female-centric. It's like, oh no, we've got to get rid of that.
Well, the funny thing, when we were at the suffrage event in Wellington, I handed a pamphlet to some woman, really snooty, sort of younger woman, who walked past me and she said, "Oh, I don't believe in women's roles."
Rex and Philippa had a bit of a talk with those young women, and the upshot was, well, maybe if you said it nicer, we'd listen. And then one woman said to Rex, like, we don't know you. And because we were laughing at you, well, of course we're laughing, you're ridiculous. And, stop laughing at me. Stop, it's rude. To be quite blunt, mate, who gives a fuck if it's rude? You're an idiot. Stop. I mean, who are you to demand a stranger behave in a certain manner? Like, this is the entitlement.
That young person's probably never had anybody laugh at her before. That's the problem.
You had never been told no, and because it was a big belly laugh.
She's ever had.
Yeah.
But it's just, the entitlement and the narcissism is off the charts. Because when this all blows up and the pushback comes back in the fight, who's going to be cleaning it up? I don't think the men will be.
No.
No, or it won't be. It's always the same thing, isn't it? Like that the younger people sort of like push and everything like that and whatever, and that's fine. That's their job, But it's always the older people who have to clean it up when things go wrong. Come in and clean things up when it goes wrong, and that's fine as well. But you don't. You basically work together, but there is certainly, there's always this thing with the young people that you don't need older people, they just stand in your way and everything like that, but you do, as I said, you need both. You need that youthful sort of, energy and drive and rubbish, nonsense and everything.
Who do they think got them all the rights that they take for granted?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. They don't have the history, but the woman I was talking about would be more middle-aged. Wasn't a young person.
Right. But, the one who told you should be nicer. Oh no, that was Di.
That was these young people.
They were young.
They were speaking with the sisters, and I asked for examples of single-sex spaces, and she goes, "My work, I mean, it's not public." She goes, "The toilet in my house, I mean, it's still not public." And she goes, "Well, you just need to be nicer." I said, "Well, I'm still waiting for you to answer."
The thing is, anyway, they don't have the history.
No,
they don't know
the history, and they're hard of thinking
that we had. They don't know, so
no, you don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Well, they just take it for granted. And I haven't read the article, but the listener this week has got, "Okay, Boomer, it's time for you to move on." And the generation
move on where?
Well,
to the big
I did intend when I retired just to sit back and do knitting. I didn't think I'd be having to fight the 1970s battle for women's rights all over again.
No, well, that's right. I think most of us would be blooming doing something else if I don't know how many generations underneath us had blooming safeguarded things instead of letting them go. Instead of letting them, we will be doing other things, but no, but they didn't. So now they've got us. That's just
they hate us.
Yeah, and the thing about getting older, of course, is that you don't really care. You know, you don't stress over it if people hate you and that. So
and also you've done it all before. You've heard it all before, and you know the truth. The truth is what matters.
And you can feel sorry for their ignorance.
Yeah, and I just think that's they're young and dumb. That's their job, that's what we were. That's what we were.
I think our education system is making them really stupid.
It is.
So we haven't got intelligence anymore. We've just got education and certificates.
And
sheep-like behaviour, ideologies in universities.
I mean, we hear about, I don't know, you hear about someone who's, all these outfits now have uni students, there almost seems to be so many places now only get uni students in, as or graduates and that, and it's just, when I hear, I just roll my eyeballs and think, oh no.
Universities used to be a place where young people were actually taught how to think critically. Now they're just places to go to have your prejudices that you've already got confirmed.
And it seems like you need a degree for so many things. So to get entrance into any sort of job, a lot of jobs, you have to see some sort of university degree. So you go there and get one, But anyway, what I was interested to hear what people's thoughts were about, this revised scope of practice and how it might sort of be impactful or whatever on the surrogacy issue, if at all, because it's although we're talking about midwifery here, the language, of course, is that wrong kind of language is seeping in.
It's a gift to surrogacy.
Yes,
it's an absolute gift. They couldn't have written a better scope themselves.
Look at the quote from Chris Lynch, Christchurch reporter from the Midwifery Council, that there's no specific definition of a woman. And midwives are required to care for anyone, however they identify. Now, if that's not opening the door for men, what do they mean?
So, Jill, the Women's Rights Party wrote a submission because there's a surrogacy bill coming up, isn't there?
So in 2022, Timothy Coffey, who himself and his partner Tim, they had surrogates for their 2 children, you see. And the current process is that the woman who gives birth to the baby, no matter whether the sperm and or the eggs are her own, she still has the first legal rights to that baby at the birth, and the intending parents have to go through an adoption process. Well, Tamati Coffey, who was an MP for Labour at the time, thought that was taking too long, and
too onerous, way too hard.
They needed to simplify the whole process. So a bill went through and was accepted the following year as a government bill by the then Labour government, which took away the woman's rights, the birth mother's rights to the baby at the birth, and came up with a process whereby the intending parents would be able to have the transfer of parenthood to themselves. And so we, of course, were all opposed to that at the time, because we know that when you carry a baby, you start to, this love for the baby starts to develop even before the baby's born. And at the time of the birth, it's very important for that baby to not be whisked away to some other people, because it causes a huge amount of stress for that baby as well as the mother. Anyway, so then the Law Commission got involved, and to their credit, they made some recommendations that completely have turned that around. And so the revised bill, the current bill, does have provisions whereby the birth mother is the first legal parent, and she cannot sign over the statutory declaration that would give the parentage to the intending parents any sooner than 7 days. We've recommended 14 days. So, but
that's after birth.
After the birth. And there's a lot in it. But
you probably realize this because you have purebred dogs, but if you buy a puppy from a breeder who's registered with Dogs New Zealand, which is what the Kennel Club is now called, they can be fined and sanctioned if they let a puppy leave their premises before it is 8 weeks old.
8 weeks, that's right. And in fact, when I got, we shouldn't be talking about puppies, but when I got one of my puppies, and she went up here on the way home underneath my hair and came around the other side and started suckling on my earlobe. So she was still wanting to feed off her mum. I actually think 12 weeks was better. But anyway, that's correct. And there's all sorts of things happening on farms that are going against taking the bobby cards. They don't take the bobby cards off the farm straight away like we used to.
No, finally, yes, that was a good thing that happened.
So we're actually more kinder to other species than we are to our own babies.
And so under the current process, the mother, even if she has signed an agreement or an arrangement with the intending parents, she can change her mind at any time. Even after the birth, she can keep the baby. So we actually think we should stay with the current system. We personally don't think this, well, not personally, but this is the position of the Women's Rights Party, that the current process of adopting the baby is the appropriate one. But we also pointed out they make a lot of how commercial surrogacy is illegal in New Zealand. But a lot of this is being driven by fertility services that are harvesting eggs, freezing eggs and embryos, and using IVF because now they can. And the marketing, you can see it, Fertility Associates. Remember, Di, when we went to the Law Commission thing, they were across the road there. They are advertising on TV, and the pictures they're showing are gay couples, gay men. And so, we asked the question, in whose interests is this about? Is it about the children or is it about the parents?
It is always about prioritizing the wants and desires of adults over the actual needs of babies. It is buying babies, even if
buying babies changes
hands.
And it's still commercial. It's a commercial activity. Those fertility services are making mega bucks out of gay couples in particular, or other couples who have, the women have had a career and they've made lots of money, and now they're in their late 30s and they find they can't get pregnant. So you're talking about affluent people buying babies through fertility services. So it's still a commercial activity, even though the surrogate mother is only getting recompense of her thing. So anyway, one of the things that we objected to, remember, with the Law Commission report issues paper on the gender in the Human Rights Act, was they asked a whole lot of inane questions. In that case, they asked 80 questions that were all completely loaded. Well, the same thing has happened in this. There's 15 questions. And so this is what we've said. With all due respect, which of course means we don't have any respect, we could not see the point of many of your questions. We don't think you asked the right questions, and here are our suggestions. So if you bear with, the first one is, can surrogacy arrangements, whether commercial or altruistic, ever be free of exploitation of women's reproductive capacities?
No.
Can we eliminate the coercive element inherent in the practice of surrogacy?
No.
and we put that even in New Zealand, where commercial surrogacy is against the law. Do we have a situation where this means, where those with means can essentially buy a baby to be carried and birthed by a woman who then becomes a commodity in a profit-driven transaction? And then we ask, do modern reproductive technology practices used in surrogacy arrangements, such as embryo and egg transfer, create so much risk of harm to the donor and recipient that legally permitting them to continue cannot be justified? And then we ask, we didn't come down on traditional altruistic surrogacy, where, like, say my sister couldn't have a baby and I carried a baby and gave it to her. So we didn't think that that was exploitive of my reproductive freedom, because it was within the family. There would likely be an ongoing relationship.
Although it actually still can be, Jill, because I mean, I've read about cases where, just as you've said, and the sister who can get pregnant is under a lot of pressure to have this extra baby that she's then actually going to have to hand over to somebody else. And so there's always going to, there's always a potential for coercion.
Yes, and in fact, TV, New Zealand On Air, produced a series based in Kaikoura where that did happen. And then the baby was born and the birth mother wanted to keep the baby. And then they stopped the series after 4 episodes, so you never find out whether she did or not. We'll probably have to wait for the next series. But anyway, we also asked, is having a baby via surrogacy really a human right? Does this imply a societal duty to provide babies to those who cannot have their children?
It's not a human right to have a baby, to have a child, or any of that stuff. That is not actually a human right.
It's just a function.
It's just a function.
That's right. So then we ask, should couples or a single parent be able to commission a surrogacy arrangement, particularly when they're in their 50s or 60s? And whose interest does that serve?
That makes me feel quite queasy.
We're not doing it overseas.
Yeah, they're doing it in the UK, where single men in their 50s and 60s.
Because I mean, they've got lots of money.
Yeah.
So is that illegal here, Jill?
No, it's not illegal.
No, it's not illegal.
It's not even a question.
No one even has bothered to think that might happen, and until it happens, and then it'll be too late, because as Jill says, it's actually legal at this point.
Yeah. Although under our current adoption process, well, social welfare does an assessment on the intending parents. And they look at all their history, of whether they've got sex, crime, offences in their history, whether they're on the Oranga Tamariki child protection list and all that sort of thing. So we do have some protections there. And then we ask about international surrogacy. So, where people, we said, rent a womb in countries where there's commercial surrogacy and there's no regulations, and maternal health services are poor and social services are ill-equipped to cope when things go wrong with the children. So there's been a, what's the name of that program? Foreign Correspondent. It's a TV program. We used to see it on 60 Minutes. We'd have clips. It's an Australian one. And they went to the Ukraine, and there was just terrible examples where babies have been born prematurely because they'll put 3 embryos into the woman, and then they'll take 2 of them out or 1 of them out, depending whether the intending parents want twins or a singleton. And that results quite often in premature birth and brain damage. And then the intending parents, in the case of one of the examples, were from the United States, decided they didn't want this brain damaged child. There's nowhere to put this child in the Ukraine. There's no services for it. And she's now 3 years old.
There's a case in California where a gay male couple ordered up a baby. And this woman, when she was about 25 weeks pregnant, it was discovered that she had a really aggressive form of cancer. And so basically this baby had to come out now because otherwise, she probably wouldn't have even made it to full term anyway, because she would have died of the cancer. And so this baby was born at 25 weeks, and the intending couple told the neonatal unit, don't treat this baby because we are not paying for the treatment. And the baby died because it was left untreated because nobody would pick up the bill for it.
That's right. So California is one of the places where commercial surrogacy is legal.
Well, and where gay male couples can actually get IVF on their insurance for their infertility problems. Nobody's actually explained how they managed to get from the petri dish to a baby. There seems to be a missing step there, but I'm sure they'll figure something out.
See the language switch, infertility. Lesbian and gay men are not infertile, and it's not an infertility problem, it's a life choice problem. Like you're not infertile because you're doing it with the same sex, mate.
Yeah, I know.
It's just ridiculous.
We know that.
Back to the language. The language is so important. Just while we're talking about the fertility associates, I'd just like to say that they're the people harvesting the sperm and eggs of the gender dysphoric youth.
Yeah, that's right. So we decided I was going to put something in about that, because in a way, if they're going to go and stuff themselves around and then later detransition, it might be a good thing that they did. But yes, that's right. That's exactly right. But that's a problem too, because one of the problems they have is the storage of these eggs and embryos. But one of the things we came down on with international surrogacy, I didn't even realize it was a thing, is that sometimes we send frozen eggs over to countries where a surrogate mother receives the frozen eggs, and there aren't even any people involved in that. Like the intending parents are still here in New Zealand. They must just rock up and pick up the baby. So we said, absolutely, that's got to stop.
So they can send up frozen eggs to a woman in like India, and she implant that gets implanted in her, and she grows a baby, and then when it's hatched, the parents
pick it up.
come fly over and pick it up.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be India because they've banned it now.
Oh, good, okay.
And
but there's still plenty of places to go.
There is plenty of places to go. And New Zealand has actually said, don't go to the Ukraine because we've got a travel advisory because of the war there. So, but I have to say that we do have quite strict regulations about it, so that you might not be able to bring the child back in here, because it goes to the Minister of Immigration, and the child might be granted a temporary visa, but there's no guarantee that the child will get citizenship. And there's a process around that. I don't know how strict they are, but there are guidelines, and it does, So that's a good thing. So our final question, this goes to your point about words, language. We've said, could growing new life in your womb, birthing that life with great risk to your own well-being, and then handing a baby over to the person who commissioned it, ever be considered just another type of work?
This is surrogacy work.
So what's happened is that the health committee, they got this on Wednesday night at midnight. Yesterday, about 3:00 in the afternoon, they wrote to those of us who had submitted. I know because somebody else I was with had got her email. I didn't get it till I got home. And it's saying, oh, you don't have to do an oral submission. I know you asked for it, but we can read your submission. But if you really want to have an oral submission, you could have a 10-minute slot next Wednesday between such and such a time, but you need to get back to us by 3:30 today. And of course, I've missed the deadline because I only just read it this afternoon. So I wrote back to them and said, well, some of us were really busy with suffrage events yesterday, celebrating women's rights to vote. And so we didn't get your email in time to respond by the deadline. How pathetic, eh? They're just trying to...
Another question I would love for them to answer is most women who act as surrogates actually already have their own children.
Yeah.
So if this mother dies as a result of being a surrogate, what compensation that's going to be adequate is going to be available for her children?
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, same-sex couples have always found ways to have babies with turkey basters or whatever. It's required to do the job.
I've heard about the turkey baster method.
Find a male who's happy to be involved in providing the sperm.
Yeah.
But, you know, so
drop it off in the letterbox, actually. That's what I heard. Drop it off in the letterbox. let them know that.
I think our main problem is with the involvement of these fertility services and the egg harvesting and the creation of embryos, which is all relatively new technology.
Well, there's going to be a whole generation of really sad women who end up childless, who are now busily freezing their eggs. So when they're over 40 and they've made their financial career success, they can finally get around to that next tick box on their list, having children. Except that the rate of getting a live baby from a frozen egg is so low that most of them are they're going to end up very, very disappointed.
And say, right? I didn't know that about the
No.
Yes, it was heralded as a new era in equality for women, that you could have your career and have a baby when you're ready to do it. So
be a geriatric mother with all of the health risks that entails. Not to mention the fact that most 50-year-olds I know really don't want to be running around after a 10-year-old child.
Well, I keep thinking that if you're in your 60s when you have them, these men in the UK, they're going to be 81 at the 21st birthday.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre.
But most of these women are going to end up childless.
Yeah, that's right. The rate is really low, and there's been some really bad things where the whole storage is broken down and the whole lot of all these eggs have gone. And in order to produce or harvest the eggs, even that's horrible. Talk about that language, Di.
Yeah.
Harvest the
eggs. They're endangering their own health by hyperstimulation in the first place.
That's right. And it's painful, really painful, apparently.
And like women, the day we arrive, we land on this earth, we only have X amount of eggs. Nobody knows how many eggs we have. So when a woman's going for all that treatment to donate her eggs or to do her study, you know, how it's now a financial plan in America and other places, they could very well be harvesting her only eggs. You just don't know how many eggs you come equipped with. You know, that's also
it's a finite number.
Yes, it is a finite number, and from my readings, and I'm not as clued up as Jill and Robin about this, but I can see it's very dangerous for women to do.
It is. I mean, donating sperm, give the guy a container and a girly magazine and 5 minutes of privacy, and you're done. You know, it's not comparable. Harvesting eggs is a really big deal. And it causes harm to your body. Donating sperm is fun.
It's all, speaking of that, donating sperm, I watched this documentary on this fella in Europe who had donated, it must have been over 500 times, and he was actually ordered to stop because of all the familial links all over the world. Like
that's one of
far
the
down
issues.
as
So how much do they get for a jack off?
It's actually the ego, Katrina. You know,
they get paid
you
too,
know,
don't they?
these hyper ejaculators, they do it for the mind rush, not for the money.
But how much do they get paid? Do you know?
Depends on where you are, I think.
Right.
Yeah, so this man had gone round to all these different clinics, and it was only, I believe it was the Aussie woman that set the ball rolling. And so, he'd donated, and there was just all these children.
Yeah,
And so in later life, when they meet each other, we've had the stories about that familial connection, and you think it's love, but oh, how you're my half brother,
That is one of the questions they ask. Do you think it makes a difference if, if the genetic material that made up the surrogate born child is actually the same as the mother? Because it doesn't need to be. It could be an embryo that's someone else's egg and someone else's sperm. Do you think that makes a difference in terms of prohibitions for marriage or civil union? And
well, it only actually makes a difference in relation to the health of the woman, because it's more dangerous for a woman to be gestating a donor egg than for her to be gestating her own egg.
Oh yeah, but they're talking about marriage, like Di was talking about. So right now, you're not allowed to marry your brother or your sister. Probably not even allowed to marry your cousin. I'm actually not sure about
first cousins. Yeah.
First cousins, that's right.
Yeah.
So what they're saying is that in the family of the surrogate mother, the birth mother, you could fall in love with someone that's from her family. And you're a surrogate born child that was birthed by her.
Yeah.
And I thought, it doesn't matter whether there's genetic link. But anyway, in the end, we had some people didn't think it mattered. I thought it did because, for that 9 months, the blood is being transferred between the mother and the baby. So there's probably genetic material from the
well, it is genetic material. She will carry that strange genetic material for the rest of her life. And of course, from the baby's point of view, they don't give a fuck. The body they grew in and the body they emerged from is their mother. They don't care if the egg came from some other woman. It's immaterial.
That's right. So that's why I thought we should say it should all be banned. But anyway, in the end, we didn't bother to answer any of their questions.
Yeah, well, when I filled it out, I said it should just be banned.
Treat them with the disdain they deserve. Yeah, right. So anyway, maybe to finish off, Deb, where to from here with the petition? What are we waiting for now?
So I wrote to them twice today to as a please explain, and I haven't heard. So we're hoping for that film sometime next week to be released. We're hoping for it to be widely shared and to get a lot more support, and maybe petition their personal MPs, lobbying, whatever. I think that the petitions committee have to come up with some sort of plan according to what you're asking on your petition, and then they have to present it to Parliament. This is what I think happens, and Parliament has about 6 months to respond to that. So this is, the scope of practice, according to the Midwifery Council, comes into effect on the 1st of October.
Even though it's under dispute?
Yeah, yes, I've heard nothing else. They've not told midwives that it's not going ahead.
Wow.
So yeah.
And so there's another spanner in the works and that's the Regulations Review Committee, which is a review committee of Parliament that looks to see if new regulations are consistent with the different acts. And so we haven't heard back from our Women's Rights Party since the initial response to us about that. They were going to get the Midwifery Council to respond. But you've seen it, haven't you, Deb? The response from the Midwifery Council.
No. So on the website, the parliamentary website, is their letter. That is the same letter as the petitions committee. So there's all our letters from the Regulatory Review Committee and the council, and then the same for the petitions committee, but there's only Mana Wāhine Kōrero and myself and the Midwifery Council with the same letter. So, and it's not even a response from the Midwifery Council. It's just sort of explaining what they've done.
The journey.
Yes.
And their three-sided house.
So we need to go back to the Regulations Review Committee and demand an answer there. I'll get onto it from the Women's Rights Party point of view, but lots of us did make submissions to them.
Yes, I think mine was to the Regulations Review Committee.
There's lots. I think there's about 7 of us that they accepted having some sort of case according to their regulations. So, and when I did write to them, so I wrote sorry, a couple of weeks later to say I'm not hearing anything, and I got slapped down, really. Just wait.
I think
something happens.
I think MWK got slapped down from the
they accepted 2 of our grounds, and then that's the end of it. They just said we've accepted, I don't know, A and I or whatever it was.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So, I think I believe that a few of us got the same letter actually from them.
Yes, I think so. But we were talking about the petitions committee when we went to make our verbal submissions. When I left there, I managed to get about 2 minutes of the Midwifery Council speaking, just before we got into an Uber, and I am sure that I heard them say that they were working with the Regulatory Review Committee. The Midwifery Council said we are working with them.
Okay. That sounds a bit ominous, doesn't it?
Well, it makes you think that the Regulatory Review Committee have put the ball in their court and said this, this is what you've got to look at. And there's some sort of negotiation between those 2 parties.
That's right.
That's nothing from the rest of us.
So I think we need to go back to them. So
let us know, Jill, what they say.
Well, I was just going to ring David Parker because he's
and I guess I mean for any updates, when there's updates to give or whatever of any significance, people will be able to find them on the perhaps the Women's Rights Party public Facebook page. Would that be right?
We've got a website. We put our stuff on the website.
Right.
Yes, but I don't know that we sort of don't have a spot for that sort of thing. No, you'd have to go to the parliamentary websites.
No, so what I mean is that if there's any when we find out about any decisions or things like that, that there will be a sort of a place where it's announced or spoken about, and it's just that sort of I'm just sort of trying to let people know somewhere that they can keep an eye on, some space, and that would be the only one I can think of like right now that would be available to everybody is the Women's Rights public Facebook page, and as you say, the website as well.
Well, the trouble with Facebook pages is things drop down unless people like them, then they pop back up again. But if you're trying to find something, even if you pin it, can only this anyway.
You pin it for a while. I mean, I obviously I can share things on my own blog as well, and Mana Wāhine obviously
you've got a website too.
But they're so they're the sort of the main places, I suppose, that people, which I can put links to those in the description below, so that at least people have some places to go and just keep an eye on proceedings if they want to. All right. On that note, anyway, that's that's been a good good old chin wag. I learned a few things myself tonight.
3 days
we
of
didn't
school
even
day.
get into inducing lactation for males.
Yes.
Well, I think that needs its own session.
Yes. Yes. But
yeah, well,
just as
we'll
a wee
get
plug, I'm being interviewed with Jennifer Blake on Sunday.
Oh yes,
Oh, yes.
that's right. Yeah.
Yes, Karen Hunt, I think her name is, another American, and Matthew, I think he's in somewhere in America. Well, 3 Americans and me anyway.
So that's going to be.
Are you going to post it, Di? Are we going to see this?
Yes, it'll be posted. I'm not sure if it's doing live or like what we're doing tonight.
Yeah,
but
Hey.
it's 6:30 on Saturday night for them, and it's like 9:30 or something on Sunday here for us.
Oh, that'd be so good. That'd be so interesting. Yeah.
Looking forward to that.
Who are you doing it through?
Pardon me? Zoom.
Who's it with? No, who's it with?
Jennifer Blake.
Yeah, but
Matthew, I haven't got my phone on me at the moment to get the names, but it's about the transhumanism and how it relates to the transborg, and how it relates to like I've said, I don't know about that stuff, but ask me about being a native and how it relates in that way, and I can talk to that.
Yeah.
And just they're giving us questions that are just all. But so that's Sunday. So that's very exciting.
It is, yeah. Oh, look forward to that. Yeah.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you.
Well, on that note, that's a great note to finish on. So we'll say goodbye and we shall meet again at some stage. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye.